My name is Layla Smith, and I'll never forget the night my world teetered on the edge of breaking, or maybe, finding itself again. I was halfway through zipping my suitcase, my fingers trembling as I stuffed in Sophie's favorite teddy bear and Liam's worn-out sneakers. The air in our Savannah apartment was thick, the kind of heavy that clings to your skin before a storm. I could hear David's footsteps, deliberate, heavy, like he wanted me to know he was coming. "Where do you think you're going, Layla?" His voice cut through the silence, sharp as a blade, cold as the December wind rattling the windows. I froze, my heart hammering so loud I thought it might give me away. The strap of my bag dug into my palm, a flimsy shield against whatever was coming next. Slowly, I turned, my eyes meeting his. David's face was a mask of control, but his eyes, they burned with something wild, something I'd learned to fear. His fist rose, slow and deliberate, and for a moment, I wasn't a grown woman anymore. I was 7 again, small and helpless, waiting for a blow I couldn't stop. My breath caught, and time seemed to stretch, every second a lifetime of dread. But then his gaze flickered past me, toward the bathroom door, and his hand stopped midair. Confusion flashed across his face, then something sharper, panic. I followed his eyes, my pulse roaring in my ears, and that's when I saw him. But before I tell you who stepped out, I need to take you back to a different time, to a small apartment in Savannah where the world still felt warm and whole. I was 7, curled up on a faded couch in our tiny living room, the smell of my mother's jasmine perfume mixing with the sweet scent of her homemade peach cobbler. Grace Smith was my everything, her laughter was sunlight, her stories were magic. Every night, she'd tuck me in with tales of brave girls who outsmarted dragons, her voice soft like the Spanish moss draping the oaks outside. "You're my brave girl, Layla," she'd whisper, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Always remember that." One morning, she wore her favorite sundress, yellow as the Georgia sun, her hair braided tight. "Why so fancy, Mama?" I asked, swinging my legs at the kitchen table. She smiled, her eyes crinkling. "Because every day with you is special, sweetheart." We spent that afternoon in Forsyth Park, tossing breadcrumbs to the ducks by the fountain. She held my hand tighter than usual, her silence heavier than the humid air. "Do you know how much I love you?" she asked, sitting on a bench under a live oak. "More than the stars," I said, grinning. She kissed my forehead, her lips trembling. "No matter what, I'm right here," she said, pressing her hand to my heart. That night, she read me a story about a girl who found her way home through a storm. I fell asleep to her voice, believing it would always be there. But the next morning, she was gone. They said her heart just stopped, like a clock running out of time. I didn't understand. How could a heart stop when it was full of love? I kept asking, "Where's Mama?" But the neighbors, with their pitying eyes, only said, "She's sick, Layla." I believed she'd come back. She had to. But a week later, a woman in a stiff suit packed my things and told me I was going somewhere better. I screamed, clutching the doorframe, "I want Mama." Her words were flat, final. "Your mother's gone, Layla. You need to grow up now." That was the day I learned love could vanish, and growing up meant learning to be alone. The Savannah foster home smelled like bleach and overcooked greens, a cold, echoing place with metal bunk beds and peeling paint. I was 7, clutching Mama's silver locket, the only piece of her they let me keep. "Your bed's by the window," a woman named Mrs. Harper said, her voice clipped. "Lights out at 9. I nodded, too scared to speak, my throat raw from crying. A girl named Mia, maybe 10, leaned over from the next bunk. "Hide that locket," she whispered. "Kids here take everything." I tucked it under my pillow, my fingers tracing its familiar shape in the dark. Days blurred into a gray routine. Wake up, eat, school, sleep. I learned to ration the candy bar Mia gave me, breaking it into tiny pieces to last a week. I told myself Mama was in a hospital, getting better, that she'd walk through the door any day. That hope was my lifeline, the only thing keeping me from disappearing into the cold walls. Mia taught me the rules: don't cry loud, don't trust the older kids, don't expect anyone to stay. "You got family?" she asked one night. I shook my head. "Mama was my family." She sighed. "Kids with no one don't get picked." 6 months later, A man in a press suit walked into the director's office. Layla Smith, someone called, and my heart jumped. Nobody used my full name. He was tall, with eyes like mine and a jaw that looked stubborn, like he'd argue with the world and win. "I'm James," he said softly. "Your father." I stared, my mind spinning. "Father? Mama never mentioned a father." "How do you know?" I asked, my voice small. He knelt down, his tie brushing the floor. "Your mom's friend found me after she passed. I took a test to be sure. I'm here now, Layla." I wanted to believe him, but my heart screamed questions. Where was he when Mama was sick? Why didn't he come sooner? He said he didn't know I existed, that he'd have fought for me if he had. But his eyes didn't meet mine when he said it, and something in me didn't trust him. Still, I followed him to his car, clutching my locket, because what else could I do? His house in Savannah's historic district was grand, gleaming hardwood, chandeliers, the smell of magnolia and polish. Sadie, his wife, greeted me at the door, her smile warm but careful, like she was afraid I'd break. "Welcome, Layla," she said, her brown eyes soft. "This is your home now." The words felt like a promise I couldn't believe. My room was bigger than our old apartment, with lace curtains and a bed that didn't creak. But it wasn't home. Home was Mama's laughter, her jasmine scent, her stories. This was just a place to sleep. Living with James and Sadie was like walking through someone else's life, every step careful, every smile practiced. Sadie tried. She packed lunches with little notes saying, "You're stronger than you know," and baked cookies that almost tasted like Mama's. James was kind but distant, asking about school like it was a checklist. "How's math? Need help?" He drove me to art classes, bought me books, but he never hugged me, never sat with me like Mama did. I told myself it was fine. I was lucky to have a roof, clean clothes, a chance to be normal. But at night, staring at the ceiling, I felt like a guest who'd overstayed. I missed Mama's voice, her stories, the way she made the world feel safe. I kept her locket under my pillow, tracing its edges until I fell asleep. Years passed, and I learned to fit in good grades, polite smiles, calling James Dad even though it felt like a lie. I was a good daughter, but I wasn't whole. When I was 18, cleaning out Sadie's attic for a garage sale, I found a box tucked behind old Christmas decorations. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. My heart stopped when I saw Mama's handwriting neat and looping, like the stories she used to write for me. I opened the first one, my hands shaking. "James, don't come looking for us. Layla thinks she has no father, and that's best. You chose your life. I'm choosing mine. But if anything happens to me, please take care of her. She's everything." The words hit like a punch. Dated a month before Mama died, the letter proved James knew about me. He'd known, and he'd stayed away. All those years I'd spent wondering why he wasn't there, believing his story about not knowing. I felt like a fool. I read every letter, each one a knife twisting deeper. Mama had begged him to step up if she was gone, and he'd waited until it was too late to matter. Sadie found me crying, the letters scattered around me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded, my voice breaking. She knelt beside me, her face soft with regret. "Your mother asked us not to, Layla. She wanted to protect you. And some truths, they're too heavy for a kid." I wasn't a kid anymore, but the weight still crushed me. That night, I stared out at Savannah's moonlit squares, feeling like the only girl in the world carrying a story no one else understood. I promised myself I'd build a life where truth didn't hide in attics, where love didn't come with lies. Georgia Southern University was my escape, a place where Savannah's oaks and Mama's locket felt like anchors to something real. I studied early childhood education, dreaming of giving kids the kind of teacher I'd needed, one who saw past the smiles to the hurt underneath. Most days, I hid in the library, tucked in a corner by a stained glass window, surrounded by books and silence. It was safe there, no one asking questions I couldn't answer. Then one October afternoon, a voice broke through. "Mind if I sit? It's packed today." I looked up to see a guy with kind eyes and a stack of medical textbooks, his dark hair falling slightly over his forehead. "Sure," I mumbled, sliding my notes over. He sat, opened a book on pediatric surgery, and read quietly, his presence steady, not intrusive. After an hour, he glanced up. "I'm Julian Brooks, by the way." "Layla Smith," I said, my voice softer than I meant. We didn't talk much at first, just shared the table, the silence, sometimes a granola bar. But it felt different, like the quiet wasn't empty but full of understanding. One day, he noticed my sketchbook, filled with doodles of storybook characters. "You're an artist," he said, smiling. I laughed, embarrassed. "Just a dreamer." "Dreamers fix things too," he said. "I'm studying to be a surgeon, not for the glory, but to help kids who need it." His words stuck with me, like he saw something in me I didn't. Weeks turned into months. We walked through Forsyth Park, leaves crunching under our boots, the air sharp with fall. Julian never pushed, never demanded more than I could give. One evening, by the fountain, he asked about my family. I hesitated. "I live with my dad and his wife. My mom, she died when I was 7. He didn't flinch, didn't offer empty platitudes. "I lost my sister," he said quietly. "She was in a bad situation. I couldn't save her, but I can save others." His honesty cracked something open in me, and I told him about the foster home, about Mama's locket. "I don't talk about this," I admitted. "You don't have to," he said, his eyes steady. "But I'm here when you do." That winter, Julian became my safe place, walking me home, sharing coffee, remembering my exam days. When I told him about Mama dying alone, he held me, not tightly, but like he was catching something fragile. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. For the first time, I believed I could be someone worth loving. I met David Lawson in my final year at Georgia Southern when he guest lectured in my education seminar. He was young for a SCD professor, polished, with a confidence that filled the room. After my presentation on storytelling in classrooms, he stopped me. "You have a gift, Layla," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "You just need someone to help you shine." His words felt like sunlight after years of shadows, and I soaked them in. David was everything Julian wasn't: bold, worldly, the kind of man who made people listen. He took me to dinners at the old pink house, introduced me to artists and academics, called me exceptional. It felt like I was finally seen, not as a broken girl but as someone who belonged. When Julian got an offer to train at a clinic in London, he asked me to come with him, to build a life together. "I love you, Layla," he said, his voice steady. But I was scared of leaving Savannah, scared of trusting someone so completely. "I need time," I told him, and he gave me space, too much space. David filled it. He proposed after 6 months, his charm drowning out my doubts. The wedding was a dream, white roses in a historic Savannah square, guests toasting our perfect love. Sadie adjusted my veil, her eyes searching. "Are you happy, Layla?" she asked. I smiled at my reflection. "David's a good man." She touched my hand. "I asked about you." I didn't know how to answer. The honeymoon was all candlelit dinners and promises of a big future, condos, investments, a life that sparkled. But one night, when I teased about having a baby early, David's smile tightened. "Why rush into chaos?" he said, his tone clipped. "We're building something real here." The word chaos stung, like I was a mistake waiting to happen. I laughed it off, nodded, because that's what you do when you're trying to be enough. I started teaching at a local elementary school, pouring my heart into my students. David climbed the ranks at SCD, his life a series of accolades and handshakes. Our photos looked flawless, his arm around me, my smile practiced. But the cracks were there. "That dress isn't quite right for the gala," he'd say. "Don't talk about your past, it's heavy." I told myself he was helping, shaping me into someone who fit his world. But deep down, I felt myself shrinking, my dreams folding into his plans. The first time David hurt me, it wasn't with his hands. It was his words, sharp and precise, cutting deeper than I expected. I was pregnant with Sophie, my heart swelling with a mix of fear and joy. I hid a tiny yellow onesie in my drawer, dreaming of the moment I'd show him. When I told him, nervous but hopeful, his face didn't soften. "What were you thinking?" he snapped, his voice like ice. "We had a plan, Layla." I stammered, "It's our baby." He leaned closer, eyes cold. "It's your mistake." You'll have it, but next time, ask me first. I whispered, I'm sorry, and something inside me broke. I wasn't just apologizing for the pregnancy, I was apologizing for existing. Sophie arrived in spring, her tiny hands curling around my finger, her eyes like mine. Holding her, I felt a flicker of the girl I used to be, the one who believed in love that didn't hurt. I thought David might change, that her softness would soften him. He didn't. He glanced at her in the hospital, said, "She's fine," and left for a meeting. At home, David's control tightened. Sophie's cries were disruptions, my exhaustion a failure. Other mothers manage, he'd say. Why can't you? I memorized the creaks in our apartment's hardwood floors, rocking Sophie in silence so he wouldn't hear. When Liam came, I hid my pregnancy for weeks, terrified of his reaction. Again, he sneered when I told him, "You're incapable of control." I stopped arguing, stopped fighting, just nodded and said, "Sorry." By the time Ava was born, I was a ghost in my own life. David's words were relentless. "You've let yourself go. Don't embarrass me at the faculty dinner." I stopped wearing makeup, avoided mirrors, afraid of the stranger staring back. My children were my only light, Sophie's shy smile, Liam's curious questions, Ava's babbling laughter. But even they felt my fear. Sophie flinched when David's key turned in the lock. Liam hid under the table when his voice rose. Ava cried at the sound of his footsteps. I sang them Mama's lullabies, tears streaming down my face, promising I'm here. But I wasn't sure how much longer I could be. The night Sophie changed everything, she was 7, just like I was when Mama left. She crawled into my bed, her small arms wrapping around me, her voice a whisper. "Mommy, I don't like it when Daddy's home." Her words hit like a tidal wave, washing away the fog I'd been living in. If my daughter was learning to fear her father, she was learning to be me, scared, small, silent. I couldn't let that happen. The next day, I took the kids to Sadie's house, telling David we were going to the park. Her Savannah home smelled like lavender and fresh bread, a warmth I'd forgotten. We sat on her porch, the kids playing in the yard, chasing fireflies as the sun dipped low. Sadie poured tea, her eyes kind but searching. "You look tired, Layla," she said softly. I stared into my cup, the steam curling like my unspoken truths. "Is it possible for two people to just not fit?" I asked. Her gaze sharpened. "Is David hurting you?" I shook my head too fast. "He's just particular. He didn't want kids so soon. I disappoint him." Sadie set her cup down. "Layla, being a mother isn't a failure. It's a gift. And no one gets to make you feel less for it." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me toward a truth I'd buried. For the first time, someone saw me, not the failing wife, but the mother fighting to keep her kids safe. David found out. He came home early, his face tight with rage. "Why were you at Sadie's?" he demanded. "The kids wanted to see her," I lied, my voice shaking. "Don't play games, Layla. You're talking about me, aren't you?" Before I could answer, his hand struck my cheek, the sting sharp, the taste of blood bitter. I stumbled against the wall, Ava's cry echoing from the hallway, Liam's small voice asking, "Is Mommy okay?" David turned toward them, his eyes blazing. "Look what you've done," he hissed. "You're scaring them." I locked myself in the bathroom that night, staring at my swollen face in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't me, she was a stranger, trapped in a life I didn't recognize. I remembered a number Sadie had given me, scribbled on a napkin, for a Savannah women's shelter. My hands shook as I dialed. "This is the Coastal Haven shelter," a calm voice answered. "Are you safe?" "No," I whispered. "My husband, he hurts me. The kids see it." "We can help," she said. "Come tomorrow. Bring the kids." I hung up, tears falling not from fear, but from a spark of hope I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't fast enough. David came home early from the gym, his footsteps heavier than usual. "Who were you talking to?" he asked, looming in the bathroom doorway. "A friend," I stammered, my heart racing. "What friend?" he pressed, snatching my phone. He redialed the last number, and the calm voice answered, "Coastal Haven Shelter. How can we?" He hung up, his eyes narrowing to slits. "You're planning to run?" he hissed, stepping closer. "You think I'll let you take my kids?" I backed toward the door, my voice barely a whisper. David, please. He blocked the exit, his fist rising, and I braced for the blow. Then the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, slicing through the tension. David froze, his hand still raised. Who the hell is that? He muttered. I shook my head, my pulse deafening. I don't know. He grabbed my arm, shoving me toward the door. Open it. And don't say a word. My hands trembled as I peered through the peephole. My breath caught Julian. Older, steadier, but those kind eyes hadn't changed. Layla, it's me, he said softly through the door. Please open it. David hissed. Who is it? A college friend, I said, my voice shaking. Open it and smile, he ordered. I turned the lock, my fingers clumsy, and the door creaked open. Julian stepped into the light, his gaze landing on my swollen cheek, my split lip. He didn't ask questions, just said, Hey, Layla, his voice calm but firm. David stepped beside me, puffing up. Who are you? Julian Brooks, he replied, unfazed. Old friend. She's married now, David snapped. Leave. Julian's eyes flicked to me, then back to David. If Layla asks me to go, I will. Until then, I'm staying. David laughed, but it was hollow. You don't call the shots here. Julian stepped closer, not aggressive, just solid. Then let's talk outside. From the hallway, Ava's cry broke through, followed by Sophie's voice soothing her. I moved toward them, but David grabbed my wrist. They can wait. No, Julian said, his voice like steel. They can't. David lunged, but Julian caught his arm, twisting it with trained precision, pinning him against the wall. You'll regret this, David growled. Doubt it, Julian said, calm as ever. Then another voice cut through. I'd step carefully, David. Mrs. Clara Evans, our downstairs neighbor, stood in the doorway, her phone glowing. I've recorded every shout, every crash. I called the shelter, too. David's face paled. Julian released him, turning to me. Get the kids, Layla. You're leaving. I looked at Sophie, Liam, and Ava, huddled together, their wide eyes full of hope and fear. Something shifted inside me, not fear, but freedom, ringing louder than any doorbell. The drive to Coastal Haven Shelter felt like a lifetime, though it was just across Savannah. Julian drove, one hand on the wheel, the other holding mine, his grip steady but not suffocating. In the back seat, Sophie whispered stories to Liam, Ava nestled in her arms, their small faces pale but quiet. They didn't cry, just clung to each other, like they knew we were escaping a storm. I stared out the window, the city's oaks blurring past, my heart caught between relief and terror. At the shelter, a woman named Rachel greeted us, her smile warm, but her eyes sharp, like she'd seen too many stories like mine. You're safe here, Layla, she said, handing the kids juice boxes. The space was soft, blankets, dim lights, voices that didn't shout. I filled out paperwork, my hands still shaking, while Rachel knelt beside Sophie, asking about her teddy bear. No one knows you're here, Rachel promised. You decide what comes next. That night, in a small room with bunk beds, I sat on the edge of a mattress, watching my kids sleep. Sophie's hand clutched Liam's, Ava's tiny chest rising and falling. Julian knocked softly, peeking in. You okay? He asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. How did you know to come? He sat beside me, his voice low. Sadie called. She said you stopped answering, that she was worried. I didn't think twice. You came all this way for that? I asked, my throat tight. He looked at me, his eyes steady. No, Layla. I came because I should have fought harder to keep you years ago. Tears stung my eyes, but they weren't from pain. They were from being seen, really seen, after so long. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and panic. Every creak made me jump. Every phone call felt like David finding us. Rachel and the shelter's attorney helped me file for a protective order, explaining custody would take time. Julian stayed close, not hovering, just there, bringing coffee, playing with the kids, giving me space to breathe. One morning, I woke without fear, my body lighter than it had been in years. Sophie started singing again, her voice soft but sure. Liam made a friend at the shelter's playroom. Ava giggled when Rachel tickled her. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming their mother again, not a shield, but a source of warmth. Months later, we moved into a small rental house near Savannah's Forsyth Park, the kind of place that felt like a fresh start. The kids picked out paint colors, blue for Sophie, green for Liam, yellow for Ava. We planted daisies in the yard, their petals bright against the Georgia sun. On Saturdays, we made pancakes, syrup dripping onto our pajamas, laughter filling the air. On Sundays, we visited the library, where I read them Mama's old stories, my voice steady now. Julian never pushed, never asked for more than I could give. But slowly, we found our way back, not to the kids we were in college, but to the people we'd become, stronger for the cracks we'd mended. He'd bring coffee, stay for dinner, help Sophie with her drawings. One afternoon, he handed me a small box. Not a ring, he said, grinning. Don't worry. Inside was a silver pendant, a tiny oak with roots curling deep. It's for strength, he said. For the life you're building. He told me about a preschool near his hospital, looking for a teacher who understood kids who'd seen too much. You're that person, Layla, he said. I took the job, stepping into a classroom where 5 small faces looked at me, not with pity, but with trust. I was home, not just in Savannah, but in myself. One night, after the kids were asleep, I sat by our fireplace, the air smelling of cedar and hope. I opened my laptop and typed a letter to David. You told me I was lucky you stayed, that I was too broken to be loved. I believed you, shrank myself to fit your cage. But every bruise, every insult, only proved your fear of a woman who could still dream, still love, still stand. You didn't break me. You showed me how strong I am. I printed the letter, folded it, and fed it to the flames, watching it curl and disappear. The power wasn't in the words, it was in letting them go. Julian stirred on the couch, his glasses crooked, a medical journal open on his chest. You okay? He asked, his voice sleepy but warm. I smiled, my heart full. Yeah, I'm free. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through fear, pain, and the fight to rise again. If my story touched you, hit that subscribe button and join us, where every moment, every choice, builds a life of courage and love. Keep telling your own story, and I'll meet you at the table.